Hi everyone, ya sabes que Carlos Tirtata to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making 3 delicious fall swirl loaves. You could also make them as a cake in a round pan. We're actually going to do 2 in a loaf pan and 1 in a 10-inch round pie pan, just so you can see the difference. We're going to be making a pumpkin swirl loaf, a carrot swirl loaf, like a carrot cake, and we're also going to make an apple spice loaf. They're so delicious. We're going to jazz them up with a cream cheese type filling. Let's get started. So we're going to start off by preparing the carrots. So you're going to need about 1 pound of carrots. I like to use baby carrots. Anytime I do this, I boil 2 pounds. You are going to have to boil them. So bring a pot of water to a boil and then go ahead and add the carrots in there. You're going to cook them until they're fork tender. That's going to take between 15 to 20 minutes. Once they're done, go ahead and drain all the water out of them, and then you can go ahead and mash them up. Once they're mashed up, you don't need to turn these into a baby food puree, but there's going to be some texture to them, so that way it just tastes nice in the cake. Set it aside so that way they can cool completely. Then we're going to move on and we're going to make the cream cheese swirl filling. You're going to start off with 16 ounces of soft cream cheese. You want to make sure that it's been sitting at room temperature, and if it hasn't, if you took it out of your fridge a little late, you can pop it in the microwave for a few seconds until it softens. It's going to be very easy to mix that way. To that, we're going to add 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1/4 cup of warm milk, and I'm going to mix that together. I should have added the milk after. And I know I'm going to regret not putting this in a bigger bowl. You can take out a mixer if you want, a hand mixer to mix this. It's going to go much faster. Okay, we're also going to add 1 egg to this. The egg gives it a little bit of a custardy element. You can leave it out if you want it to be a little more dense. And a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. And you're just going to mix this until it's all nice and smooth. Once the mixture is nice and smooth, it's ready. Just set it aside. We're going to move on to making the loaves. Okay, so let's make the pumpkin bread first. So we're going to start off with the dry ingredients. So 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, and I always put heaping teaspoons because I love cinnamon, especially in pumpkin bread. 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And just whisk that all up together. You could also sift it if you want to pass it through a sifter. And that's it for the dry ingredients. You can add any chopped nuts to this, 1/2 cup of them, any dried fruit. So you could do dates, cranberries, raisins, or a combination of dried fruit, whatever you like. I'm going to leave it plain. And in this bowl, I'm going to mix in the wet ingredients. So 1/2 cup of light olive oil or whatever vegetable oil that's very light in flavor that you like to use. 2 eggs. You want to make sure that everything is at room temperature. 1 cup of granulated sugar, a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, and 1/4 cup of brown sugar. And go ahead and whisk that all together. The only ingredient that's missing is the pumpkin puree. And once this is mixed up, I'm going to add that in here. So you're going to need 1 can or 15 ounces of pure pumpkin puree. You want this to be unflavored, nothing added to it other than mashed up cooked pumpkin. If it's pumpkin season where you live and you like to cook your own pumpkin, you can go ahead and use that. You can substitute sweet potato puree for this, butternut squash puree. They all work. Okay, once everything is incorporated, go ahead and add the dry ingredients. You could add them all at once and then just whisk them in until everything is combined. If you're adding fruit, dried fruit, and nuts to this, you can just wait until this is all incorporated. Toss the walnuts and let's say you're using cranberries in a couple of tablespoons of flour and then just fold them in here once you're done mixing. But like I said, I'm leaving this plain today. I'm not going to add anything to it, but those things taste really delicious in pumpkin bread. Resist the urge to overmix. And then once the flour is mostly incorporated, you can just go in with a spatula and mix in. So if there's anything stuck to the bottom or the sides of the bowl, it's all nice and even. Then you're going to take a loaf pan. This is a 9 by 5-inch loaf pan, and line it with parchment paper. Sometimes even loaf pans that are supposed to be non-stick, they sometimes stick, and then it's just so hard to get the loaf out of there. The best way to do this is to take a 1/2 sheet of parchment paper, crumble it up, then it'll stay in place much better. You can also cut it to fit perfectly in here, but I like it to be a little bit bigger. That way when the cake is made, you can just lift it out of the pan once it cools. You can also spray the parchment paper if you want to. I'm not going to do that. So we're going to take 1/2 of the cake batter, or bread butter. This is basically a cake, and we're going to put it into the pan. A little bit more than 1/2 I like to put. And then the cream cheese filling is about 3 cups worth. So I'm gonna take 1 cup of the filling. This is a half cup, but I have measured olive oil in it. So this is just gonna slide out so easily, just like that. And go ahead and spread it. Then you're gonna take the remaining cake batter and put it on top. And then you can use a knife and just swirl. Make some swirls so that way it'll kind of make a nice decorative sort of swirl once it bakes. And that's it. We're going to set this aside, and now we're going to move on to making the apple bread. For the apple cake, we're going to need 1 cup of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves, and then just whisk that all together. For the wet ingredients, half a cup of light vegetable oil. I'm using light olive oil. 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. Of course, if you like it less sweet, you can just do 1 cup, or even 3/4 of a cup would work. 2 eggs at room temperature. Half a cup of either Greek yogurt or any plain yogurt that you have. Sour cream works well. If you don't have either of those two, you can do milk. A teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. And then just whisk that all together. Then go ahead and add the flour and the dry ingredients. Whisk that until the flour is just combined. We're still gonna add the apples and nuts to this. This is an apple loaf, so we need 1 apple. I've already peeled it. I'm just gonna dice this up, get rid of the core. You can use a gala apple, you can use pink lady apples. Green apples are gonna be a little bit more tart, but if you like those, they're perfect for baking. We're gonna toss the apples in a little bit of flour. If this was a bigger bowl, I'd also add a half a cup of walnuts and just toss everything all together. But it's a small bowl, and I just didn't feel like reaching for another one. So go ahead and add the apples, half a cup of ground or finely chopped walnuts. Those are also going in. You can also make these in 10-inch round cake pans as well, or 10-inch round pie pans will also work. The final loaf, we're not gonna make in a loaf pan because I only have 2 9 by 5-inch loaf pans. So we are gonna end up using a pie pan, but a 10-inch round cake pan will do as well. And it'll actually bake up a little bit faster in that. This is much deeper, so it takes a little bit longer to bake than if you're gonna bake it in a bigger pan. So half of the batter goes into the loaf pan, and then the cream cheese filling, and top it with the remaining batter. And then you can just take a knife and swirl everything a little bit, just like that. And I like to put the loaf pans on a baking tray that's lined with parchment paper, so it's easier to transfer in and out of the oven. Plus, if anything spills, it'll spill onto the loaf pan and not into the oven. Now it's time for the carrot cake. So I already mashed my carrots and they're nice and cool. I did cook much more than I originally needed. So I'm going to just measure out a pound, 15 to 16 ounces, which is about 2 full cups. Make sure that the carrots have cooled. And the rest, there's about another cup in here, another cup's full of mashed carrots. I can just put these in a freezer safe bag and store them in the freezer or even in my refrigerator. I'll be making more of this cake because everyone loves it. It goes good with coffee and with tea. So we have the carrots in here, and then we need half a cup of olive oil. This is light olive oil. Again, use your favorite vegetable oil that doesn't have too much flavor. 1 cup of granulated sugar, 2 eggs, a teaspoon of vanilla. And we're gonna set that aside because we're supposed to mix our dry ingredients first, so that way we use 1 whisk. 1 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder. This makes it nice and light. Half a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 heaping teaspoons of ground cinnamon, a little pinch, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Whisk those all up. Then go ahead and whisk up the wet ingredients until everything is combined. It comes together so quickly. Go ahead and add the flour until it's just combined, because we're also gonna add some walnuts and raisins to this. So I have some ground walnuts here. I like to grind a big bag and then keep it in the freezer. So half a cup of walnuts and half a cup of raisins. You can leave the walnuts and the raisins out, or if you don't like one thing, you just leave it out. I'm just gonna measure it by eye. We like raisins in here. So the raisins go in. And then you need a little bit of flour, about 1 or 2 tablespoons, so that way they don't sink to the bottom of the cake. Switch to a spatula and fold everything in all together. And the batter is ready. So this time I'm gonna use a 10-inch round deep dish pie pan. You can just use a regular 10-inch round cake pan. Just be sure to spray it with some cooking spray. I'm using some avocado oil. You could brush it with butter or with olive oil, and then transfer all of the batter into the cake. Well, not all of it, we're doing half, remember? Because we're gonna put the swirl in here. And then all of the remaining cream cheese filling that we made. Top it with the remaining batter, do the little swirl, The loaves are going to bake for about 70 minutes. There's much more in the pan and it's deeper and thicker, so it is going to take a little bit longer. Once a toothpick that's inserted into the center comes out clean, you're going to want to let them cool completely. Then go ahead and take them out. It's going to be so easy to just lift them out of the baking pan with the parchment paper. And again, let them cool a little bit more and they're going to be ready to be served. The pie pan is going to take about 45 to 50 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And same thing, once a toothpick that's inserted into the center comes out clean, it is ready. But again, you want it to cool completely before you go and serve it. Now, to serve it, you could drizzle this with a nice icing. I personally don't like to do that, but if you were going to add it, you just basically combine some confectioner's sugar with milk or orange juice, and you get it to the consistency that you like. The more orange juice you add, the thinner the icing is going to be, and the less you add, or the less milk, orange juice or milk, it's going to be thicker. If I'm using it, I like it to be thicker. And you would drizzle it on top, and you could also top it with some pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. You can do pistachios or chopped pecans or walnuts, whatever you like, and then you can just cut into it and it's ready to serve. Make some coffee, call some friends over. Let me know how you're making them in the comments section down below. I hope you guys give these recipes a try, and I hope you share them with friends and family. They freeze well. Once they're made, once they're baked and they're cooled completely, you can wrap them tightly in some plastic wrap and then with some aluminum foil and store them in the freezer. They're perfect for gift giving if you're going to someone's house during the holidays. They'll stay fresh in your freezer for a month or two. They're delicious, you guys. Again, I hope you guys give these recipes a try. If you do, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Yes, us.